The first plate was always the heaviest. Not because of the weight. Amara Brooks had been balancing trays since she was 14, but because of what it represented. Rent. Groceries. The lawyer's retainer her father couldn't afford. She moved through Mama Joy's soul kitchen like water finding cracks. 6 plates stacked along her forearm. Hot sauce bottles tucked in her apron pocket. The Friday dinner rush smelled like fried catfish and somebody's Annie's perfume. Afrobeats thumped from the kitchen speaker. Old men argued about the Knicks near the window. This was bed stewy. This was home. Table 6 needs more cornbread. Mama Joy called from behind the register, her voice warm as the collard greens simmering on the stove. Amara nodded, already moving. She delivered plates to a family of 4, refilled sweet tea for the couple in the corner, cleared table 9 before the last fork hit the plate. Her father always said she had a gift for reading a room, knowing what people needed before they asked. Tonight, she needed that gift to stretch further than usual. The letter had come that morning. City letterhead. Legal jargon. The kind of words that sounded polite, but meant we're taking your land whether you cooperate or not. Her father, Elijah Brooks, sat at the kitchen table for an hour after reading it, saying nothing, just staring at the paper like he could burn a hole through it with his eyes. The Brooks family plot wasn't much to look at. A stretch of industrial soil on the edge of the neighborhood, ringed by rusted fences and cracked concrete. Developers had been circling for years, offering money that sounded large until you realized it was pocket change for the towers they planned to build. Elijah refused every offer. Some things aren't for sale, he'd say, voice steady as stone. That land is proof we were here long before they built glass towers and called it progress. Amara wiped down table 6 and glanced at the clock. 2 more hours. Then she'd head home, help her father draft another response to another lawyer, pretend they had options. The door chimed. A man walked in. He didn't belong. Not because he was out of place, though the tailored suit and slick-back hair screamed money, but because of the way he moved. Like he'd already measured the room, calculated the exits, decided which table had the best sight lines. He chose table 6, the one she just cleaned. Amara grabbed a menu, walked over, forced her customer service smile into place. Welcome to Mama Joy's. Can I start you with something to drink? He looked up. His eyes were dark, sharp, and impossibly calm. What do you recommend? He asked. His accent was soft, precise. Korean, maybe. The kind of English that came from expensive international schools. Depend what you're hungry for. He smiled. Everything. Something about the way he said it made her skin prickle. But she wrote down his order, brought him lemonade, and told herself she was imagining things. She didn't know that across town, in a glass tower stamped with silver letters, a file sat on a mahogany desk. A file with her father's name on it. A file labeled, Holdout. What would you do if someone tried to take the one thing your family refused to sell? Drop your answer below, because what happens next will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about love and land. He came back the next night, and the night after that. By the end of week 2, the kitchen staff started joking about Amara's private customer. Table 6 became his spot. He always ordered the same thing, collard greens, cornbread, catfish when they had it, and always asked questions that felt too specific to be casual. How long has your family been in this neighborhood? What keeps people here when developers offer big checks? Your father. He sounds like a man who knows what matters. Amara should have noticed the pattern. Instead, she noticed his hands. Clean. No wedding ring. The way he listened when she talked, like her words were worth more than the tip he'd leave. His name was Ryu Sun-ho. He said he ran a logistics company, import-export, shipping routes, distribution hubs. Boring business talk that somehow sounded fascinating when he explained it. He was in New York to expand operations, scouting locations, meeting partners. "This city has good bones," he said one evening, watching the street through the fogged window. "But bones need protection. Legacy needs defending." She thought he was talking about business. He was talking about her. 3 miles north, in Ryu Tower's private conference room, attorney Tak Jinwoo stood before a projected map of Brooklyn. Red dots marked properties already acquired. One stubborn gray that remained. The Brooks family plot. "He won't budge," Tak said, tapping the screen. Elijah Brooks, union foreman, 58 years old. No debts we can leverage. No vices we can exploit. Elder Moon, the 70-year-old board chairman, frowned from his seat. His hands were folded, liver-spotted and steady. "Then we wait. Offer more money. Be patient." Ryu Sunho sat at the head of the table, silent. His fingers drummed once against the armrest. "Patience is expensive," he said quietly. "We break ground in 8 months. Every delay costs us partners, contracts, momentum." Tak understood. He always understood. "There are other methods," Tak said carefully. "Legal pressure, eminent domain filings, code violations that suddenly appear." "That takes time we don't have," Ryu replied. His voice was calm, but his eyes were ice. "I need that land. Not eventually. Now." The room went quiet. Elder Moon shifted uncomfortably. Director Bay stared at his notepad. Director Choi looked at the ceiling like she could disappear into it. They all knew what came next when Chairman Ryu said now. Tak's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then at Ryu. "Brooks leaves his community meetings every Thursday night. Walks the same route home. 10:45, like clockwork." Ryu stood. The meeting was over. "Solve the problem," he said. Tak nodded. Back at Mama Joy's, Ryu left a $100 tip on a $30 meal. Amara called after him as he reached the door. "This is too much." He turned, smiled. "You work hard. You deserve it." That Thursday night, Elijah Brooks left his community meeting at 10:30. He walked the same route he'd walked for 30 years, past the corner store, under the busted streetlight the city kept promising to fix. He never saw the headlights. Witnesses would say it happened too fast. A dark sedan. No plates visible. Gone before anyone could move. The police report called it a hit and run. Attorney Tak called it clearing the board. Ryu Sun-ho didn't ask questions. He already knew the answers. Have you ever trusted someone who is too perfect? Comment red flag if you saw this coming, because the worst part isn't what he did. It's what he's about to do next. The funeral happened on a Tuesday. Amara couldn't remember most of it, just flashes. The casket, the him her father hated. Mama Joy squeezing her hand so tight it hurt. The detective who showed up with a business card and empty promises about ongoing investigations. 3 weeks later, the investigation went cold. No witnesses came forward. No cameras caught the plates. The case file gathered dust in a precinct basement while Amara drowned in paperwork she didn't understand. Probate, estate taxes, outstanding liens the city suddenly remembered existed. And the letters, they came on official stationery, polite language wrapped around threats. Pending zoning revisions, eminent domain considerations. Public interest necessitates timely resolution. Translation, sell, or we'll take it anyway. She was drowning. Then Ryu appeared at the funeral home, 3 days after they'd buried Elijah. "I heard what happened," he said softly, holding white lilies. "I'm so sorry. Your father reminded me of my own, a man who believed in something bigger than money." She'd been holding it together until that moment. Then she broke. He didn't rush her, didn't offer useless comfort, just stood there while she sobbed into a stranger's expensive suit her grief pouring out in waves she couldn't control. Afterward, he helped, not in loud, performative ways, in quiet ones. He showed up with groceries when her fridge sat empty for a week. He sat across from her at the kitchen table, reading through legal documents she couldn't parse, translating lawyer speak into plain English. This clause means they're trying to lowball you. Don't sign. This letter is a scare tactic. You have rights. You're not alone in this. Mama Joy watched it all with careful eyes. That man's too polished, she whispered one evening, pulling Amara aside. Men that smooth don't just show up out of kindness. But Amara was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being strong. Tired of reading letters that treated her father's memory like an inconvenient obstacle. When Ryu smiled at her, really smiled, she felt something she hadn't felt since the headlights took everything. Safe. 6 months later, he asked her to dinner. Not at Mama Joy's. Somewhere else. Somewhere with cloth napkins and wine lists she couldn't pronounce. You're brilliant, he said over dessert, his eyes locked on hers. You notice everything. You remember details people forget. That mind of yours, it's wasted waiting tables. She laughed, uncomfortable. I'm just surviving. You're doing more than surviving, he said. You're holding on to something everyone else would have surrendered. That takes strength. He reached across the table, took her hand. Let me help you hold on. The proposal came 1 year after Elijah died. Ryu took her to the edge of the Brooks family plot, under the weak glow of a streetlight that still hadn't been fixed. Marry me, he said. Let me take care of you. Let me take care of this land. For both of us. The ring was platinum. Flawless. She said yes. The wedding was small. Amara wanted it that way. Just Mama Joy, a few friends from the neighborhood, and Elder Moon representing Ryu's side. Nobody this mites. No long ceremony. Nothing that reminded her of the funeral still haunting her dreams. They signed the papers at City Hall on a Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, the Brooks family plot had new ownership documents. Joint tenancy. Both names. Amara thought it meant partnership. She didn't see the second transfer. The one that happened 3 weeks later, buried in a stack of estate planning documents Ryu's lawyer brought to the penthouse. The ones he said were standard asset protection and tax optimization strategies. She signed where he pointed, trusted the man who'd held her while she grieved. The land moved again, quietly, legally, from the marital estate into Golden Tiger Trust, a Cayman Islands entity that fed into a network she'd never heard of. By the time she unpacked the last moving box in their Manhattan penthouse, the Brooks family plot no longer belonged to her father's memory. It belonged to an empire built on secrets. The penthouse was everything Bed-Stuy wasn't. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Marble countertops. A bathroom bigger than her childhood bedroom. Closets filled with clothes she didn't buy, tailored to measurements she didn't remember giving. You're Madame Ryu now, the personal shopper said, smiling. You represent the family. Image matters. Family. She learned quickly what that meant. Ryu Tower stood 40 stories tall in Midtown, black glass and steel stamped with silver letters, RYU Global. The lobby smelled like expensive cologne and fresh flowers. Security nodded when she passed. Assistants bowed slightly. On the 16th floor, the boardroom stretched like a cathedral. Elder Moon sat at one end, white-haired and dignified. Director Bay, the CFO, hunched over spreadsheets with the intensity of a man counting his own heartbeats. Director Choi signed documents with a pen that shook. Director Lee barely spoke, just watched everyone else with calculating eyes. And at Ryu's right hand, always, Attorney Tak Jinwoo, the Viper. He never raised his voice, never made threats out loud, But when he entered a room, people straightened. When he whispered to Ryu during meetings, decisions changed. Amara attended the charity galas, smiled for photographers, learned to say the right things into microphones at donation events. Ryu Global believes in giving back to communities. But late at night, passing conference rooms with frosted glass, she'd catch fragments of other conversations. Words that didn't match the polished image. Macau, Worry Bank, pensions. When she asked Ryu what those meetings were about, he'd kiss her forehead. Business. Nothing you need to worry about. You're too soft-hearted for this world. It's sharp. So she stopped asking, started noticing instead. The quarterly reports arrived in leather binders. Amara wasn't supposed to read them. They were for board members, executives, people who understood terms like leverage buyouts and offshore reconciliation. But she'd always been good with numbers. She noticed the routes first. Distribution hubs in Atlanta, Chicago, ports on both coasts. Partnerships with companies she'd seen in the news. Kuong, major retailers, logistics giants. On paper, Ryu Global was legitimate. Impressive, even. Then she noticed the gaps. Line items that didn't connect. Transfers to entities with vague names. Red Dragon Holdings. K-Star Consulting. Amounts that appeared in one column and vanished in another. She mentioned it once over breakfast. What's Red Dragon Holdings? Ryu's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. Investment vehicle. Tax strategy. Why? Just curious. The numbers seemed. Seemed what? His tone shifted. Not angry. Colder. She backtracked. Nothing. I was just reading too much into it. He relaxed. Smiled. You're brilliant, but this isn't your world. Trust me to handle business. You handle making us look good. She nodded. But that night, at another board dinner, she watched Director Bay's face when someone mentioned Worry Bank America. He flinched, just for a second, but she saw it. Director Choi's eyes flickered when the conversation shifted to employee pensions. Director Lee signed a document she clearly hated, her pen pressing so hard it nearly tore the paper. Elder Moon sat at the head of the table, silent and weary. These people weren't happy. They were trapped. The dinner ended with polite applause for a presentation Amara hadn't understood. She stood to leave, purse in hand, when she felt it. A phone vibrating in her bag. Not hers. Ryu's. He must have grabbed the wrong one from the foyer table. They had the same model, same black case. She pulled it out to text him, then stopped. The notification was still visible on the lock screen. A photo. A message. Yuri Kimu. The girl with perfect eyeliner who'd been hired 2 months ago as a temporary assistant for language support during Asia trips. In the photo, she wore a hotel robe. Her hair was down. The room behind her was expensive. The message read, "Miss you, Chairman. I warmed your side of the bed for you." Amara's hands went cold. She stood in the marble hallway of Ryu Tower, surrounded by wealth she'd never asked for, holding proof that the man who'd saved her from grief had been planning something else entirely. The elevator dinged. Ryu stepped out, saw her face, saw the phone in her hand. His expression didn't change. "It's not what you think," he said calmly. But his eyes said something different. "You weren't supposed to see that." Ryu took the phone from her hands gently, like she was a child holding something sharp. "Yuri has boundary issues," he said, voice steady. "It's cultural. In Korea, assistance sometimes." "Don't." Amara's voice cracked. "Don't explain this away like I'm stupid." His jaw tightened. For half a second, something flickered behind his eyes. Irritation. Calculation. Then it was gone. "You're reading into entertainment culture you don't understand. Business relationships in Asia operate differently. She's being inappropriate, yes, but it's harmless." She said she warmed your bed. A phrase. Idiom. You're taking it literally. He stepped closer, cupped her face with both hands. I married you. I chose you. Does that mean nothing? She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But the photos stayed burned into her mind. The robe, the soft lighting, the familiarity in those words. That night, she couldn't sleep. By morning, she'd convinced herself she was overreacting. Jet-lagged, stressed. Maybe he was right. Maybe she didn't understand how business worked in his world. Then the calendar invite disappeared. She'd been scheduled to attend a charity gala at the plaza. Ryu's assistant had confirmed it twice. She'd bought a dress, planned her hair, everything. The morning of the event, the invite vanished from her phone. She showed up anyway. Security stopped her at the entrance. I'm sorry, ma'am, but your name isn't on tonight's list. I'm Emare Ryu. My husband is. We're aware, Mrs. Ryu, but we can only admit guests on the approved list. Inside, through the glass doors, she saw him. Ryu, in a tailored tuxedo, laughing with donors. And beside him, in a red dress that fit like a thread, Yuri Kim. She stood in the cold for 20 minutes before calling a car. Ryu came home at 2 in the morning, smelling like champagne and excuses. There was a miscommunication. My assistant must have. Your assistant? Or your girlfriend? His face went flat. Don't be paranoid. That word landed like a fist. The incidents multiplied. A board dinner where her seat was suddenly double booked. Moved to the far end of the table while Yuri sat in her spot. A private joke in Korean from director Choi that made half the table laugh until Elder Moon cleared his throat, eyes full of pity. Documents she knew she'd read, contracts, account statements, would vanish from her desk, only to reappear in different places. When she confronted Ryu, his responses grew sharper. You're imagining things. You're being emotional. That's not how it happened. You're remembering wrong. One evening, she came home to find a glass of water on the kitchen counter. She was certain she'd left it on the table. It was always there, Ryu said, barely looking up from his phone. I put it on the table. I know I did. Amara. He set the phone down, eyes full of concern that felt rehearsed. You've been under a lot of pressure. Maybe you should talk to someone. Talk to someone? I'm not crazy. I didn't say crazy. I said pressure. There's a difference. But the way he looked at her said otherwise. She started recording the placement of things. Taking photos. Writing down conversations. Trying to prove to herself that her reality was real. That she wasn't losing her mind. That the glass had moved. That the man she married was rewriting the world around her, one small lie at a time. Have you ever questioned your own memory because someone kept insisting you were wrong? That's not love. That's control. Keep reading, it gets darker. Ryu never raised his hand. He didn't need to. The erasure was surgical. Her opinions at dinner parties would be subtly contradicted. Actually, that's not quite right, Ryu would say with a patient smile, then offer a correction that made her sound uninformed. Her stories would be interrupted mid-sentence. Conversations redirected before she could finish a thought. Her presence became optional, then inconvenient, then invisible. At a corporate dinner in Soho, she spent 20 minutes talking to a potential investor about distribution logistics, a topic she'd studied from Ryu's own reports. The man seemed impressed, engaged, asking follow-up questions. Ryu appeared beside her like smoke. Darling, you're boring Mr. Chon with details. His hand rested on her lower back, gripped just tight enough to communicate. Why don't you check on the wine selection? I'll handle this. She was dismissed like staff. When she tried to object later, he sighed. You were talking over your head. I saved you from embarrassing yourself. I wasn't. You were. His voice stayed calm, reasonable. You don't understand the nuances of international trade agreements. That's not an insult. It's just reality. But she'd been quoting his own reports. The gaslighting intensified. Keys would disappear, then reappear in places she'd already checked 3 times. You must have walked right past them, Ryu would say, shaking his head fondly, like she was a forgetful child. Appointments she'd confirmed would suddenly never exist. There's no record of that call, Mrs. Ryu. Assistants would tell her, voices laced with pity. She started doubting everything. Her memory, her perception, her grip on basic facts. One night, she found herself standing in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, staring at a coffee cup, trying to remember if she'd already made coffee or just thought about making it. She broke down crying, voice raw and desperate. I feel like I'm going insane. Ryu found her there, wrapped his arms around her trembling frame. You're not insane, he whispered into her hair. You're exhausted. You've been under so much stress since your father died. Maybe you never really dealt with that grief. His voice was so gentle, so concerned, so loving. Let me help you, he said. There's someone I know. Dr. Kwok, Korean American, specializes in cross-cultural adjustment issues. He helped a colleague's wife through something similar. She looked up at him, tears streaking her face. You think I need a psychiatrist? I think you need support. And I think you deserve to feel like yourself again. She was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of questioning her own mind. Tired of being the problem. So she said yes. Dr. Kwok's office was in Midtown, all soft lighting and leather chairs and diplomas framed in expensive wood. He listened patiently as she talked. About Elijah. About the land. About Yuri and the vanishing appointments and the glass that kept moving. He nodded, took notes, asked careful questions. How long have you felt this disconnection from reality? I'm not disconnected from reality. Things are actually happening. Of course, I'm not suggesting otherwise. But perception can be influenced by unresolved trauma. Grief does complex things to memory. He prescribed pills. Small white tablets that made the world softer around the edges, made her hands shake, made her memory blur. And in his notes, hidden from her view, he began writing words that would later be used as weapons. Paranoid ideation, delusional suspicion regarding spouse, recommend continued observation. Ryu collected those papers carefully, like ammunition for a war she didn't know she was fighting. Word count, 550. The pills made her forget things. Not big things, just edges. Details that used a stick now slid away like water off glass. She'd walk into a room and forget why. Lose her train of thought mid-sentence. Stare at her phone, unable to remember who she'd meant to call. That's normal, Dr. Kwok assured her during their weekly sessions. Your brain is recalibrating. Healing takes time, but she didn't feel like she was healing. She felt like she was disappearing. 3 months into treatment, her hands shook so badly she couldn't hold the pen steady. Her sleep was either non-existent or 14 hours deep, no in between. When she mentioned this, Dr. Kwok adjusted the dosage. The shaking got worse. Sometimes things get difficult before they improve, he said, voice calm as a meditation app. Your husband mentioned you've been having increasing concerns about financial impropriety at his company. Is that still present? She blinked, trying to focus through the fog. I saw documents. Transfers that didn't match. Pensions. From Worry Bank America. Money that should have been there wasn't. It went somewhere else. Macau, maybe you're... Dr. Kwok's pen moved across his notepad. She couldn't see what he was writing, but his expression shifted. Subtle. Clinical. Amara, has anyone else confirmed these discrepancies? An accountant? A lawyer? No, but I saw. You saw documents you believe showed irregularities. In a field you're not trained in. while under significant stress and medication adjustments. He leaned forward, voice gentle. I'm not saying you're making things up. I'm suggesting your interpretation might be influenced by your mental state. Paranoia often fixates on complex systems, finances, conspiracies, because they feel tangible. Something you can point to. Her throat tightened. I'm not paranoid. I know what I saw. Of course. He smiled. We'll explore this further. But for now, let's focus on stabilizing your baseline. The notes he took that day said something different. Patient exhibits persistent, delusional thinking regarding spouse's business practices. Financial obsession intensifying. Recommend evaluation for possible bipolar spectrum disorder. Paranoid features evident. He sent copies to Ryu. Ryu sent them to his lawyer. The file grew thicker. One evening, Amara came home early from an appointment she'd somehow missed. Another calendar glitch, another assistant insisting no such meeting existed, and found Ryu in his study with attorney Tak. They didn't notice her at first. Dr. Kwok's report is useful, Tak said quietly, scanning a document. If she escalates, we have grounds for intervention. Involuntary hold, if necessary. She's not escalating, Ryu said. She's medicated. For now. But if she starts making accusations publicly, contacting authorities, attempting to access files, she won't. She barely remembers what day it is. Tak's smile was thin. Good. Keep it that way. Amara backed away before they could see her, heart hammering against her ribs. Involuntary hold. They were planning to lock her up if she became a problem. That night, she stared at the pill bottle on her nightstand. White tablets. 60-day supply. She thought about the board minutes she'd glimpsed. The transfers. The missing money. Her father's death on a rain-slicked street. She thought about the woman she used to be. The girl who could carry 6 plates and still remember your order by heart. Then she opened the bottle, swallowed the pill, and hated herself for being too afraid to stop. When the people supposed to help you are the ones keeping you quiet, who do you trust? Comment if you've ever felt trapped by someone who claimed to care. It's about to get worse. She made jollof rice on a Wednesday. Not because Ryu asked, because she needed to feel like herself again. Needed to remember what it felt like to create something with her own hands. Smell spices that reminded her of Mama Joy's kitchen, of Brooklyn, of the life before Ryu Tower swallowed her whole. Ryu was working late, again, so she decided to bring him dinner. A wife thing, a normal thing. Maybe if she tried harder, the distance between them would close. Maybe if she stopped seeing shadows, they'd stop being there. The 16th floor was quiet. Most staff had gone home. Ryu's office door was unlocked. She pushed it open, container of rice warm in her hands. He wasn't there. Probably in a meeting. She'd wait. She set the container on his desk, and that's when she saw it. A document, half hidden under a leather portfolio. Worry Bank America. Internal memo, confidential. She shouldn't have looked, but her hands moved before her brain could stop them. The first page was financial jargon. Contribution schedules. Employee pension fund balances. The second page made her stomach drop. Temporary borrowing authorization, Q3. Money moved from pension accounts into a holding entity. Then transferred again and again. Shell companies with names she'd heard whispered in frosted glass conference rooms. Red Dragon Holdings, Macau. Golden Tiger Trust, Cayman Islands. K-Star Consulting, Las Vegas. Her fingers traced the numbers. Hundreds of thousands. Million. Taken from people who worked in warehouses and distribution centers. People who trusted Ryu Global with their futures. She flipped faster. Another entity appeared. K-Star Consulting LLC. Owner listed, Yuri Kim. Her vision blurred. This wasn't just an affair. This was theft. Fraud. A system built to siphon money while keeping everyone, including her, distracted by lies. She pulled out her phone, started photographing pages. The door opened behind her. Ryu's shadow fell across the desk. His voice was too calm. "What are you doing?" Her mouth went dry. I brought you dinner. I saw. You saw confidential business documents and decided to photograph them? These are pension funds. People's retirement. Where is this money going? His expression didn't change. That's what terrified her most. No surprise. No anger. Just cold assessment. You're not well, Omara. You're seeing patterns that aren't there. This is exactly what Dr. Kwok warned about. Financial obsession, paranoid interpretation of standard business practices. Standard? Ryu, this is enough. He took the documents from her hands, his grip firm. Go home. Take your medication. I'll be there soon, and we'll discuss getting you more help. More help. She heard what he didn't say. More medication, more doctors, more ways to make sure you stop asking questions. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind spun through fragments. Pension funds. Macau. Yuri's company. Her father's land that somehow ended up in Golden Tiger Trust. She got out of bed at 4 a.m, body shaking. From the pills or fear, she couldn't tell anymore. In the bathroom mirror, she barely recognized herself. Thinner, hollowed out, eyes that looked like someone had dimmed the lights behind them. This wasn't grief. This wasn't mental illness. This was being erased. She gripped the counter, knuckles white. Then her chest tightened. Air wouldn't come. The room spun. She collapsed. When she woke up, she was in a hospital gown. Fluorescent lights. Beeping machines. A wristband with her name printed in clinical black letters. Dr. Kwok stood at the edge of the bed, clipboard in hand. Behind him, Ryu sat in a chair, face arranged in perfect concern. You had an episode, Dr. Kwok said gently. Stress-induced psychosis. Your husband called an ambulance. You're very lucky he found you in time. Her mouth felt full of cotton. I wasn't. It's okay. You're safe now. We're going to help you. On his clipboard, she caught a glimpse of the form he was filling out. Recommendation. Inpatient psychiatric observation. 72-hour hold, extendable. She tried to sit up. Restraints held her down. Soft ones. The kind that don't leave marks. The psychiatric ward smelled like disinfectant and defeated hope. Amara's room had a bed, a chair, and a window with safety glass too thick to break. No shoelaces allowed. No phone. No access to the outside world except supervised visits. Dr. Kwok came twice a week. Ryu came with flowers and regret etched across his face like he'd practiced in a mirror. I just want you to get better, he'd say, holding her hand through the medication fog. I can't lose you too. Like her father. Like she was already halfway gone. The diagnosis deepened with each session. Paranoid delusions. Possible bipolar disorder. Persecution complex. Financial obsession. On paper, she was unraveling. In reality, she was being unraveled. The pills here were stronger. Made her sleep 16 hours a day. Made conversations feel like wading through mud. Made her forget why she was angry in the first place. When she tried to explain the documents, the transfers, Yuri, the pensions, nurses nodded sympathetically and wrote patient fixated on conspiracy theories in their charts. When she cried, they called it instability. When she insisted her husband was hiding money, they called it projection. When she demanded to be released, they extended the hold. For your own safety, Dr. Kwok said. 3 weeks in, she stopped taking the pills. Not openly. She learned quickly that defiance earned you more restrictions, more medication, more time locked behind doors that only open from the outside. So she hid the tablet under her tongue, pressed it into the crack of the mattress as soon as the nurse left, suffered through headaches and withdrawal, shakes in silence. Within 4 days, her mind started clearing. The fog lifted, details sharpened. She began noticing patterns again. Nurse shifts changed at 7 in the morning and 7 at night. The trainee on night rotation was young, easily distracted, sometimes left the station computer unlocked when she went to check on other patients. Patterns meant gaps. Gaps meant opportunity. On a Tuesday night, Amara asked for water. The young nurse nodded, walked toward the far corner. Amara moved to the station desk, eyes scanning the unlocked screen. There, her file, open in the system. She clicked fast, heart hammering. Diagnoses, medication history, and at the bottom, a scan attachment. Letter from Ryu Sunho, requesting psychiatric evaluation for possible involuntary committal. Dated 3 months before her episode, before she'd found the pension documents, before she'd collapsed. He'd been planning this. Another document, deeper in the file. Confidential note from Dr. Kwok. Patient presents with paranoia focused on perceived financial misconduct of husband. Recommend framing as protective concern from spouse to avoid escalation. Will continue documenting delusional patterns to support future intervention if necessary. Framing. Protective concern. They hadn't been treating her. They've been building a case. Mrs. Ryu, the nurse's voice snapped her back. Amara turned, water cup in hand, face carefully blank. Thank you. She walked back to her room, heart beating like thunder. That night, while the trainee was distracted with an emergency in another wing, Amara printed the documents from the still unlocked computer, folded them, hid them inside her hospital gown. 10 days later, she checked herself out against medical advice, smile painted on like armor. Back at the penthouse, she flushed every pill down the toilet. Then she pulled out the printed pages and spread them across the bed. For the first time in months, she felt something other than fear. She felt rage. Cold. Focused. Sharpening into a blade. They thought she was broken. They were wrong. Subscribe now, because what she does next will prove that underestimating a woman is the deadliest mistake a man can make. The pills sat in the toilet bowl, white circles dissolving into nothing. Amara flushed twice to make sure. Then she walked to the bedroom, pulled out the hospital documents she'd hidden in a shoebox under the bed, and spread them across the comforter. Evidence of a plan to silence her, lock her away, make her disappear without anyone asking questions. She photographed every page with her phone, uploaded them to a cloud account Ryu didn't know existed. One she'd set up using her old Brooklyn email address, the one from before she became Madame Ryu. Then she started paying attention, on purpose, with the clarity she'd been denied for months. Ryu's patterns emerged like code breaking under pressure. He always took calls from TAC in his study with the door closed. Always checked his phone obsessively between 8 and 9 p.m. Texts he'd delete immediately after reading. Always kept his laptop locked, but synced everything to the family cloud for convenience. Convenience was a weakness. She learned that from watching him operate. He liked everything accessible, everything connected. One password across devices, because remembering multiple ones was inefficient. That arrogance would cost him. One night, while Ryu slept, she crept down to the basement. The server room hummed in the dark, all blinking lights and expensive equipment Ryu had installed for security and backup purposes. The old desktop sat in the corner, connected to the family network, forgotten. She powered it on, waited for the login screen. Tried the password she'd seen him type a dozen times. Our Tower 2019 hashtag. It worked. The family server unfolded before her like a map to buried treasure. Folders. Subfolders. Files labeled innocuously. Consulting_3, board_minutes, private, temp_bay. She clicked and found hell organized in spreadsheets. Wire transfers from Woori Bank America employee pensions, routed to Red Dragon Holdings in Macau. Board minutes where Mr. Park, the internal auditor, questioned missing funds, followed by his termination letter dated 3 days later. Incorporation papers for K-Star Consulting in Las Vegas, listing Yuri Kim as owner, but using Ryu's contact email and Ryu Global's business address. She kept digging. A folder labeled legal_archive. Inside, scanned memos from Attorney Tack. Her hands shook as she opened the first one. Subject, property acquisition, Brooks plot. Status, obstacle identified. Recommend alternative resolution. She scrolled down. Another memo, dated 2 weeks later. Subject, accident resolution, E. Brooks. The words blurred. She had to read them 3 times before they made sense. Subject successfully neutralized. Witness risk, minimal. Vehicle disposed. Insurance. Donation to local community initiative as PR cover. Recommend proceeding with Phase 2, personal approach to heir. Phase 2, personal approach. Heir. Her. The hit and run wasn't random. Her father had been murdered. For land. And she had been the plan all along. If you're still watching without subscribing, you don't know what happens when the truth comes out. Subscribe so you never miss the fallout. She stumbled upstairs at dawn, pages printing quietly in the basement behind her. In the bathroom mirror, the woman staring back looked like a stranger. But not a broken one. Not anymore. She wasn't Madame Ryu. She was Elijah Brooks's daughter. And she was done pretending she didn't see. Amara became a ghost in her own home. She moved through the penthouse like she always had. Coffee in the morning, polite conversation at breakfast, the perfect wife routine Ryu expected, but everything had shifted beneath the surface. She was hunting now. Every night, after Ryu fell asleep, she'd slip down to the basement. The server became her classroom. She taught herself how files were structured, how backups worked, how cloud syncing left digital fingerprints everywhere. Ryu's obsession with convenience was the crack in his armor. Everything was connected. Phone, tablet, laptop, home server. He wanted seamless access to his empire from anywhere. He forgot that seamlessness meant vulnerability. She found folders he thought were private. Consulting_3 contained contract for shell companies in Vancouver and Singapore. Entities with no physical offices, no employees, just bank accounts that moved money in circles. Temp_Bay held Director Bay's personal files, evidence he'd objected to pension fund transfers twice before being convinced to approve them. Emails showing pressure. Threats veiled as corporate guidance. Board_minutes revealed the truth behind every polished quarterly report. Votes that weren't unanimous. Objections from Director Lee that got buried. Elder Moon asking uncomfortable questions, then going silent after private meetings with Ryu and Tak. They were all complicit, some willingly, some because refusing meant ending up like Mr. Park. Fired, blacklisted, erased. But the worst file sat in a folder labeled Phase_2. Inside, a timeline. A strategy document dated 3 years ago. Target, Elijah Brooks holdout property. Stage 1, direct acquisition attempts failed. Stage 2, pressure tactics via city leverage failed. Stage 3, alternative resolution approved, attorney tack assigned. Stage 4, heir assessment and cultivation. Candidate, Amara Brooks, daughter, 27, unmarried, restaurant worker, financially vulnerable, emotionally isolated post-incident. Approach vector, romantic pursuit. Timeline, 6 to 12 months. Asset transfer mechanism, marriage. She read it 4 times. They'd profiled her like a target, assessed her vulnerabilities, waited for her father to die, a death they'd caused, then moved in while she was drowning in grief. Subscribe before the next chapter, because if this happened to her, who's to say it couldn't happen to you? The romance wasn't real. The proposal wasn't love. It was acquisition strategy. She printed everything. Hundreds of pages. Wire transfers, board minutes, emails, the timeline, tax memos, pension discrepancies, shell company structures. She stored them in 3 places. A safe deposit box at a bank in Brooklyn under her maiden name, a cloud drive Ryu couldn't access, and a physical copy hidden inside an old suitcase in Mama Joy's storage closet. Then she kept playing the part, the medicated wife, the one who'd stopped asking questions. At dinner, Ryu asked how her day was. Quiet, she said, smiling. I'm feeling better. Clearer. He looked pleased. Good. Dr. Kwok mentioned you might need a medication adjustment, but if you're stabilizing on your own, that's even better. I just needed time and rest. He reached across the table, squeezed her hand. You've been through so much. I'm proud of you for getting help. She squeezed back, thought about the file labeled phase number 2, thought about her father bleeding out on a Brooklyn street, thought about every pension worker whose retirement had been stolen to build Ryu's empire. Thank you for being patient with me, she said softly. His smile widened. He thought he'd won. He had no idea she'd already moved 3 steps ahead. That night, she made a list. Special Agent Carter, FBI, Financial Crimes Division, Brooklyn DA's Office, Securities and Exchange Commission, media contacts. She didn't act yet. She waited, because rushing and angry got you dismissed as emotional, unstable, exactly what Dr. Kwok's files said she was. But walking in calm, with receipts, that was how you destroyed an empire. The rain came hard the night she found the final piece. Amara sat in the basement server room, blue light from the monitor washing over her face, scrolling through a folder she'd opened and closed 3 times already. Legal_archive_secured. She knew what was inside. She'd seen the subject lines, the dates, the clinical language that treated human lives like line items in a budget. But reading it, really reading it, meant accepting something she'd been holding at arm's length since the night she saw Tack's first memo. Her father's death wasn't an accident. It was a business decision. She opened the file. Memo. Accident Resolution E. Brooks. Date. November 14th, 2019. From Attorney Tack Jinwoo. To Chairman Ryu Sun-ho. Property acquisition, Brooks plot final resolution. The words swam. She forced herself to keep reading. Subject E. Brooks successfully neutralized November 12th, 2019, 22:47 hours incident staged as vehicular hit and run, high traffic area, minimal witnesses. Vehicle disposed via offshore channels. Police report filed. Investigation expected to remain unsolved per standard protocol. Witness risk assessment, minimal. Responding officers noted no surveillance in area. 2 pedestrian witnesses, impaired, low credibility. No forensic evidence recovery anticipated. Insurance protocol. $50,000 anonymous donation to Bed-Stuy Community Fund, delivered via intermediary nonprofit. PR cover established. Recommendation. Proceed to Phase 2, air cultivation. Subject's daughter, Amara Brooks, 27, now primary access point to property transfer. Psychological profile suggests vulnerability to romantic approach during grief period. Timeline: initiate contact within 2 weeks. Target acquisition: 6 to 12 months. The date: November 12th, 2 days before Thanksgiving, the night her father never came home. She remembered that night with brutal clarity now. The phone call from the hospital, the fluorescent lights, the doctor's tired face, the words that didn't make sense: blunt force trauma, internal bleeding, didn't survive surgery. She remembered standing in the morgue, looking at a sheet-covered body, thinking this couldn't be real. It wasn't real. It was manufactured. This is what happens when you're not paying attention. Subscribe now. You need to see how she makes them pay. Her hands curled into fists. She scrolled down. Another memo, dated 6 months later. Subject: Phase 2 update. A. Brooks engagement progress. Target successfully engaged via prolonged contact at subject's workplace. Trust established through financial assistance and emotional support during probate process. Romantic interest confirmed. Property transfer initiated via marriage proposal. Recommend expedited timeline to avoid external interference. Land transfer to be completed via standard estate planning protocols post-wedding. Psychological assessment. Subject displays strong loyalty patterns, low suspicion threshold, grief-driven decision-making. Ideal candidate for long-term control strategy. Control strategy. That's what she was. Not a wife, not a partner, a strategy. She kept reading, even as her vision blurred. Email chains between Ryu and Tak, discussing her like she was a chess piece. Which restaurants to visit, which compliments worked best, how to position himself as a savior, not a suitor. Tak, she asks too many questions about the land transfer. Ryu, redirect. Marriage is about trust, not paperwork. Tak, if she becomes a problem? Ryu, she won't. And if she does, we have options. Options. She knew what that meant now. Dr. Kwok. The hospital. The involuntary hold paperwork. They'd build a cage around her before she even knew she needed to escape. Amara sat in the dark for a long time, rain hammering against the small basement window. She thought about her father walking home that night, tired from the community meeting, probably thinking about her, about the land, about the future he was trying to protect. He never saw the headlights, never knew his daughter would marry the man who ordered his death, never knew she'd spend 2 years sleeping beside a murderer, calling him husband, believing his lies about love and partnership. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to hold back tears that came anyway. When she finally looked up, her reflection stared back from the dark monitor screen. Hollow, furious, unbreakable. She printed the memos, every single one. Then she opened a new browser window and typed, FBI Financial Crimes Division, New York. She was done collecting evidence. It was time to weaponize it. The coffee shop was in Red Hook, far from Midtown towers and security cameras. Special Agent Marcus Carter sat across from Amara in a corner booth, stirring sugar into burned coffee. He was younger than she expected. Early 40s, sharp eyes, the kind of face that had seen enough corruption to stop being surprised by it. She slid the USB drive across the table. This is everything. Wire transfers, pension fund theft, shell companies in Macau and Las Vegas, board minutes, emails, and evidence of murder. Carter's eyebrows lifted slightly. Murder? My father. They killed him to get to land I inherited. Then they married me to legitimize the transfer. She said it without emotion now. Facts. Cold. Clean. Carter plugged the USB into his laptop, started scrolling. His expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. Worry Bank America Pension Funds, he muttered. Red Dragon Holdings. K-Star Consulting. He looked up. This is racketeering, securities fraud, embezzlement. If the murder evidence holds up, this is RICO territory. It holds up. I have the attorney's memo. Dates, details, disposal protocol. Carter leaned back, studying her. Mrs. Ryu. Brooks. My name is Amara Brooks. He nodded slowly. Ms. Brooks. This is explosive. But we can't just walk into Ryu global guns blazing on your word alone. We need corroboration. Independent evidence. Witnesses. This'll take time. How much time? Months. Maybe a year. Financial crime cases are slow. We have to build. I don't have a year. Her voice cracked slightly. He's already filed for divorce. He's going to use psychiatric records to paint me as delusional. He'll bury me in legal fees, turn every board member into a character witness, and I'll be the crazy wife who imagined everything. Carter's expression softened. Then we need to corner him. Publicly. Somewhere he can't control the narrative. Ow! He smiled, slow and calculating. They think you're weak. They think you're crazy. They think you'll fold. I won't. I know. So use that. He leaned forward. The divorce hearing. You represent yourself. Play the part they've written for you. The struggling wife, no lawyer, barely holding it together. Let them get confident, comfortable, and then you introduce evidence that blows the case wide open. On record, in front of a judge. Once it's in the court system, we can move fast. Subpoenas, asset freezes, arrests. Amara's mind raced. You want me to walk into court alone. I want you to walk in looking alone. But you won't be. He tapped the USB. You'll have this. And I'll have warrants ready the second you get it into evidence. She thought about Ryu laughing at her across the courtroom. Thought about Tak's smug face. Thought about Elder Moon and the board members who'd stayed silent while her father's pension fund workers got robbed. What if I lose? You won't. Carter's voice was firm. Because you're not actually fighting a divorce. You're triggering a federal investigation. And once that starts, there's no stopping it. Subscribe before she walks into that courtroom. Because what happens next will make you believe in justice again. She left the coffee shop with a plan. And for the first time in 2 years, she felt something other than fear. She felt dangerous. Ryu filed for divorce on a Tuesday. The papers arrived via courier. Thick envelope, law firm letterhead that cost more per hour than Amara used to make in a month. She read them in the kitchen, coffee going cold beside her. The petition was brutal in its precision. Grounds, irreconcilable differences due to respondents' deteriorating mental health. Attached, Dr. Kwok's psychiatric evaluation. Letters recommending inpatient care. Medication records. Incident reports from her hospital stay. A narrative carefully constructed. The unstable wife. The concerned husband. The tragic dissolution of a marriage destroyed by mental illness. No mention of stolen pensions. No mention of Yuri Kim. No mention of a murder disguised as a hit and run. Ryu walked into the kitchen an hour later, face arranged in appropriate regret. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I wanted to tell you in person, but my lawyer advised. It's fine. Her voice was steady. Calm. I understand. He blinked, clearly expecting tears. Anger. Something. You understand? You need to protect yourself. I've been difficult. I know that. She met his eyes. I won't fight this. I just want it to be over. Relief washed across his face. Thank you. Really. I'll make sure you're taken care of. The settlement will be fair. Fair. She almost laughed. Instead, she nodded. When's the hearing? 3 weeks. My attorney will handle everything. You should get representation, though. Even if it's amicable, you need someone looking out for your interests. I'll think about it. She didn't hire a lawyer. She did something better. She went to Brooklyn. Mama Joy's storage closet smelled like mothballs, and old memories. Amara pulled out the suitcase she'd hidden months ago, opened it on the floor. Inside, printed evidence. Hundreds of pages. Wire transfers from Woori Bank America to Red Dragon Holdings. Board minutes showing Mr. Park's objections and subsequent firing. K-Star Consulting's incorporation papers with Yuri's name and Ryu's email. Pension fund discrepancies. The timeline document labeled Phase_2. Tax memos about her father. She organized everything chronologically. Highlighted key passages. Created a reference guide so she could find specific documents in seconds. Then she bought a cheap digital recorder at a bodega. Started carrying it everywhere. In her pocket during dinners with Ryu. In her purse during the tense conversations where his patience finally cracked and he hissed threats he thought no one would ever hear. Keep talking and you'll end up back in that ward. No one will believe you. You're documented as delusional. I've built an empire. You think anyone will choose your word over mine? She recorded it all. At night, she practiced. Standing in front of the bedroom mirror, yellow legal pad in hand, rehearsing how to introduce evidence, how to cross-examine, how to stay calm when Tak objected to everything. She watched YouTube videos about courtroom procedure, read case law about admissibility, learn the difference between hearsay and business records. She wasn't a lawyer, but she was Elijah Brooks's daughter, and she'd always been good at paying attention. Most people never see the trap until it closes. Subscribe now, so you're ready when the truth comes out. 2 days before the hearing, Agent Carter called. Warrants are ready. The second your evidence enters the court record, we move. Asset freezes, arrest, the works. How many? Ryu, Tak, 3 board members who signed off on the pension transfers. Maybe more, depending on what surfaces during testimony. She closed her eyes. Imagined Ryu's face when federal marshals walked into that courtroom. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You still have to get it on record. And they're going to fight you every step. Tak is vicious. He'll object, intimidate, try to get you dismissed as incompetent. Let him try. Carter chuckled. See you on the other side, Ms. Brooks. She hung up, packed her evidence into a worn leather bag, and prepared for war. New York Supreme Court, Division 8, smelled like old wood and broken promises. Amara arrived 30 minutes early, wearing the black dress she'd bought with her own money before the wedding. Simple, pressed, mended at the seams where 2 years of pretending to be someone else had worn through. Her hair was braided back, neat and deliberate. No designer box. No jewelry except her father's old watch, the one the hospital had returned in a plastic bag. She carried a worn leather satchel containing a yellow legal pad, a cheap ballpoint pen, and 300 pages of evidence that would dismantle an empire. The gallery was already filling. Journalists in the back row. Financial crimes beat, probably tipped off by someone who'd heard whispers about Ryu Global. A few curious law students. Courthouse regulars who'd seen the docket and sensed drama. Then the other side arrived. Ryu entered like he owned the building. Tailor navy suit that cost more than her father's funeral. Hair perfect. Face calm. He moved to the respondent's table with the confidence of a man who'd never lost anything that mattered. Beside him, attorney Tak Jin Woo, the Viper, in charcoal gray and predatory focus. He set down a leather briefcase, adjusted his cuffs, scanned the room like he was calculating exits and weaknesses. Behind them, Director Bay sat rigid, face pale and sweating despite the air conditioning. Director Choi whispered something to Director Lee, who stared straight ahead like she could disappear through force of will. And in the second row, perched like a bird in a silk blouse, Yuri Kim. Soft makeup, doe eyes, playing the part of innocent bystander. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur. All rise. The Honorable Judge Pyo presiding. Judge Pyo swept into the room, black robes whispering, face carved from stone and decades of seeing every lie humans could invent. He was 60-something, Korean-American, with eyes that missed nothing. He settled into his seat, adjusted his glasses, glanced at the docket. Appearances, he said, voice flat and efficient. Tak rose smoothly, buttoning his jacket. Tak Jin-woo of Tak and Associates, representing the respondent. Chairman Ryu Sun-ho, Your Honor. Judge Pyo's gaze shifted to Amara's table. She stood. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. For a second, every eye in the courtroom landed on her. A black woman, alone, no lawyer, no team, just a legal pad and a pen. Her voice came out softer than she intended, but steady. Amara Ryu, Your Honor, representing myself. The gallery murmured. Takis eyebrow lifted, bodily perceptible. And Ryu laughed. Not loud, not obnoxious, just a low, rich sound that carried perfectly across the silent courtroom. The same laugh he'd used at Mama Joy's when she'd stumbled over a compliment and blushed. The same laugh that used to make her feel seen. Now it sounded like contempt. He leaned toward Tak, speaking in Korean, loud enough for the front rows to hear. She really is crazy. She thinks this is some kind of movie. He didn't notice Judge Pyo's eyes flicker. Didn't notice the slight tightening of the judge's jaw. Judge Pyo understood every word. The judge cleared his throat, gaze hardening. Mrs. Ryu, he said, voice carrying an edge now. Your husband's holdings are substantial. His company employs thousands. He is represented by highly experienced counsel specializing in complex financial litigation. Are you certain you wish to proceed without an attorney? Amara met his eyes. Yes, Your Honor. The court will not lower its standards because you have chosen to represent yourself. If you fail to object to evidence, it will come in. If you fail to present adequate proof of your claims, you will lose. If you waste this court's time with unfounded accusations, there will be consequences. Do you understand? Her hands trembled slightly against the table. She thought about her father's last walk home, about the memo that called him subject successfully neutralized, about 3 years of being gaslit, medicated, and erased, about the workers whose pensions had been stolen while Ryu built towers with their futures. Fear flashed behind her eyes like lightning. Then it was gone. Yes, Your Honor, she said clearly. I understand. She glanced at Ryu. He was still smiling, still confident, still certain this was a performance that would end with her humiliation and his victory. He had no idea that in her worn leather satchel, beneath the legal pad and the cheap pen, sat the first domino in a chain that would bring his empire crashing down in front of the world. If you think you know how this ends, you don't. Subscribe now, because what she says next will change everything. Judge Pyo picked up his gavel. Let's proceed. Judge Pyo gestured to Amara. Petitioner may present opening statement. She stood, legal pad in hand. For a moment, the room felt impossibly large. Every face turned toward her, every breath waiting. Then she remembered Elijah's voice. Some things aren't for sale. She spoke. Your Honor, this case isn't just about a marriage. It's about a system built on theft, fraud, and murder disguised as business. Tak shot to his feet. Objection. Inflammatory characterization without foundation. Overruled. Judge Pyo's voice was ice. This is opening statement. Counselor. Sit down. Tak sat, but his eyes promised consequences. Amara continued, voice growing steadier. Over the past 3 years, my husband and his associates have systematically embezzled millions from employee pension funds at Worry Bank America. They've used shell companies in Macau, Las Vegas, and the Cayman Islands to hide the money. They've silenced internal auditors who question the transfers. And they've built this empire on the backs of warehouse workers who trusted Ryu Global with their futures. She paused, let that sink in. But it started before that. It started with my father, Elijah Brooks, who refused to sell family land. So they killed him, staged it as a hit and run. Then they targeted me, grieving, vulnerable, and orchestrated a marriage to legitimize the land transfer. The gallery erupted in whispers. Judge Pyo's gavel cracked down. Order. Ryu leaned toward Tak, whispered furiously. Tak's face remained neutral, but his knuckles whitened on the table edge. Amara opened her satchel, pulled out the first document. I have evidence. Wire transfers, board minutes, attorney memos, incorporation papers. Everything. Your Honor. Tak stood again, voice smooth as oil. The petitioner is clearly unwell. Her psychiatric records, which we will introduce, show a documented history of paranoid delusions. I have those records too, Amara interrupted, along with proof that Dr. Kwok was paid by Ryu Global to fabricate a mental illness diagnosis. I have the letter my husband wrote, requesting involuntary committal 3 months before I ever had an episode. I have recordings of him threatening to lock me away if I kept asking questions. Director Bay's face went white. Yuri Kim shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Elder Moon stared at Ryu like he was seeing him for the first time. Judge Pyo leaned forward. Mrs. Ryu, these are serious allegations. Do you have documentation to support them? Yes, Your Honor. Extensive documentation. Then let's see it. Counselor Tak, you'll have opportunity to respond. Mrs. Ryu, proceed with your evidence. Amara pulled out the first exhibit. This is a wire transfer record from Woori Bank America, dated March 2022. It shows $847,000 moved from employee pension contributions into an account held by Red Dragon Holdings in Macau. She approached the bench, handed copies to Judge Pyo and Tak. Tak barely glanced at it. Objection. Hearsay. No proper foundation. We don't know where she obtained this. It's a business record, Amara said calmly. Exception to hearsay under Federal Rules of Evidence 8036. I obtained it from Ryu Global's internal server, which I had authorized access to as a family member. Judge Pyo's eyebrows lifted slightly. Overruled. I'll allow it provisionally, subject to authentication. Amara moved to the next document. This is a board meeting minute from April 2022. Mr. Park, the internal auditor, questioned the pension fund discrepancies. Here's his termination letter, dated 3 days later. She handed over more papers. Tak objected again and again. Each time, Judge Pyo let the evidence in, watching Ryu's side of the table with increasing interest. Then Amara pulled out the K-Star Consulting Incorporation papers. This company, registered in Las Vegas, lists Yuri Kim as owner. But the business address is Ryu Tower. The contact email is my husband's. And the funding, $2.3 million, came directly from diverted pension accounts. She handed the papers forward. Yuri's face drained of color. Ryu's jaw clenched. For the first time, his composure cracked. He turned to Tak, spoke in rapid Korean. Shut this down. Now. Judge Pyo's eyes narrowed. Mr. Ryu, if you need to consult with your attorney, do so quietly or step outside. Amara felt the shift in the room. The journalists were writing furiously. The law students leaned forward. Even the bailiff looked riveted. She'd been in court for 20 minutes, and the empire was already starting to crumble. Subscribe before the next witness, because when Dr. Kwok takes the stand, everything he built falls apart. Judge Pyo called a 15-minute recess. When they returned, Amara stood. I'd like to call Dr. Samuel Kwok to the stand. Tak's head snapped up. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Dr. Kwok is not a party to this divorce. His medical records are privileged. The petitioner is waiving privilege regarding her own treatment, Judge Pyo said. If she wants to call her psychiatrist, she can. Dr. Kwok, are you present? A small man in an expensive suit rose from the gallery, face tight. Yes, Your Honor. Approach and be sworn. Dr. Kwok walked to the witness stand like he was approaching an execution. His hands trembled slightly as he placed them on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Ido. Amara approached, legal pad in hand. Dr. Kwok, you treated me for approximately 8 months, correct? Yes. And during that time, you diagnosed me with paranoid delusions, possible bipolar disorder, and recommended inpatient psychiatric care? That's correct. You presented with symptoms consistent with. Did my husband pay you? Silence. Dr. Kwok, I'll repeat the question. Did Ryu Sunho pay you directly for my treatment? Stooge. Objection. Relevance. It's relevant to bias, Your Honor, Amara said. If Dr. Kwok had financial incentive to diagnose me a certain way, that affects the credibility of his medical opinion. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Doctor. Dr. Kwok shifted. I received consulting fees from Ryu Global for corporate wellness programs. How much? I don't recall the exact. Amara pulled out another document. I have the contract. $180,000 annually, starting 1 month before I became your patient, for consulting services that included exactly 0 wellness programs. She handed the paper to Judge Pyo. The judge read it, expression darkening. Doctor, did you receive compensation specifically tied to Mrs. Ryu's treatment? Dr. Kwok's throat worked. I received performance bonuses. Performance bonuses for what? Amara pressed. For successful patient management. Successful management meaning keeping me medicated and quiet? That's not. I was treating genuine symptoms. Amara pulled out her phone, held it up. I have a recording. Would you like me to play it? Tak was on his feet. Your Honor, this is ambush. We weren't provided. It's my own conversation, recorded with single-party consent in New York, Amara said. Perfectly legal. Judge Pyo nodded. Play it. She pressed play. Ryu's voice filled the courtroom. Keep talking, and you'll end up back in that ward. Dr. Kwok has enough documentation to have you committed indefinitely if you become a problem. The gallery erupted. Judge Pyo slammed his gavel. Dr. Kwok looked like he wanted to crawl onto the witness stand. Amara turned back to him. You weren't treating me. You were building a case to silence me. You wrote notes designed to make me look unstable, so my husband could use them exactly like this, to discredit anything I said about his crimes. I documented what I observed. Did my husband tell you what to observe? Objection. Tak's voice was sharp now, desperate. Calls for speculation. I'll rephrase, Amara said. Dr. Kwok, did you ever meet with my husband privately to discuss my treatment? Yes, but that's normal family involvement. How many times? I don't. 12 times. I have your appointment calendar. 12 meetings where you discussed my delusions about financial crimes at Ryu Global. 12 meetings where you refined the narrative that I was paranoid, unstable, dangerous to myself. She pulled out one final document. This is a letter you wrote to my husband 3 months before I was hospitalized. You recommended framing involuntary commitment as protective concern to avoid escalation. Those are your words, correct? Dr. Kwok stared at the paper. Yes. You were planning to have me committed before I ever had an episode. I was concerned about your mental state. You were concerned about protecting a criminal. How much did he pay you for that letter, Doctor? Dr. Kwok's mouth opened. Closed. No sound came out. Judge Pyo leaned back, face carved in disgust. Step down, Dr. Kwok, and I suggest you retain counsel. The Board of Medicine will be receiving a copy of this testimony. Dr. Kwok stumbled off the stand. Ryu's face was stone now, all pretense of calm gone. Tak scribbled furiously on his legal pad, whispering urgent instructions to a paralegal who rushed out of the courtroom. But it was too late. The door at the back of the courtroom opened. Special Agent Marcus Carter walked in, flanked by 2 federal marshals. Behind them, 6 more agents, badges visible. If you're not subscribed yet, you're about to miss the arrests. Subscribe now. This is where justice gets served cold. Agent Carter approached the bench. Your Honor, Special Agent Marcus Carter, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have warrants for the arrest of Ryu Sun-ho, Tak Jin-woo, and 3 members of the Ryu Global Board of Directors. Judge Pyo nodded. Proceed. Tak shot to his feet. Your Honor, we haven't been notified due process. Due process is being served right now. Counselor. Judge Pyo's voice was steel. Sit down or step aside. Tak tried to move toward the door. A federal marshal blocked his path. Attorney Tak Jin-woo, you're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and accessory to murder. The courtroom exploded. Journalists rushed the doors. Camera flashes went off. Judge Pyo's gavel cracked down repeatedly, trying to restore order. Ryu stood slowly, face drained of color. This is a mistake. I have diplomatic. You have nothing, Carter said flatly. Ryu Sun-ho, you're under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder. Another marshal moved forward with handcuffs. Ryu looked at Amara. For the first time in 3 years, she saw fear in his eyes. You don't know what you've done, he said quietly. They'll destroy you for this. They already tried. Her voice was steady. Calm. I'm still here. You're the one in handcuffs. The marshals cuffed him, began reading rights. Director Bay was next, then Director Choi, then Director Lee. Each one arrested, each one read their rights while the gallery watched in stunned silence. Elder Moon sat alone at the respondents' table, hands folded, face ancient with regret. He met Amara's eyes, nodded once, an apology, an acknowledgement. Too late, but there. Agent Carter approached Amara, voice low. We have enough to freeze every account, seize every asset tied to the shell companies. Pension funds will be recovered. Workers will get their money back. And my father? Carter's expression softened. We're reopening the case. With tax memo as evidence, we can pursue murder charges. It won't bring him back, but justice is enough. He nodded. As the marshals led Ryu and Tak toward the door, Ryu turned one last time. You won't survive this, he said. The people I work with are being arrested as we speak, Carter interrupted. Red Dragon Holdings in Macau, Golden Tiger Trust in the Caymans. We've been coordinating with international authorities for weeks. Your empire is done. Ryu's face crumbled, not with remorse, with the realization that he'd been outplayed. By the woman he'd dismissed as crazy. By the widow he'd created. By Elijah Brooks's daughter, who'd paid attention when everyone assumed she was too broken to notice. The courtroom doors closed behind them. Judge Pyo turned to Amara. Mrs. Ryu, or should I say, Ms. Brooks, I'm granting your petition for divorce. All marital assets are frozen pending criminal proceedings. The Brooks family plot will be returned to your sole ownership. He paused, studying her. This court has seen a lot of things, but I've rarely seen someone fight this hard, this smart, while the world told them they were losing their mind. You should be proud. Her throat tightened. Thank you, Your Honor. One more thing. He glanced at the gallery, at the journalists still scribbling. I'm ordering a full investigation into Dr. Kwok's licensing and practice. No one should weaponize psychiatry to silence inconvenient truths. He banged the gavel. Court adjourned. Amara stood in the sudden quiet, legal pad still in her hand. People approached, journalists with questions, law students with admiration, strangers who'd watched the whole thing unfold and needed to say something. But she walked past them all, out the courtroom doors, down the marble steps, into the cold November air that smelled like rain and freedom. She stood on the courthouse steps, the same steps where her father had once rallied union workers, where he'd fought for the land they'd eventually killed him for. Cameras flashed. Questions shouted. She didn't answer any of them. She just stood there, feeling the weight lift. Feeling like Amara Brooks again. Subscribe, because the final chapter shows what happens when a woman refuses to be erased. 3 months later, the verdict came down. Guilty on all counts. Ryu Sun-ho, 35 years. Attorney Tak Jin-woo, 28 years. Director Bae, Choi, and Lee. Reduced sentences in exchange for testimony. Dr. Kwok. Medical license revoked. 2 years for conspiracy. The pension funds were recovered. Every dollar. Workers who'd been robbed got their retirements back, plus interest, plus damages paid from the liquidation of Ryu Global's assets. The company itself was dissolved, pieces sold off, the black glass tower on Midtown skyline stripped of its silver letters. Elder Moon retired quietly, donated his remaining fortune to community organizations in Bed-Stuy. It didn't absolve him, but it was something. Amara stood outside Mama Joy Soul Kitchen on a Thursday evening, steam rising from the windows, Afrobeats thumping from inside. The restaurant had expanded. New tables, new staff, a mural on the side wall showing Elijah Brooks's face, painted by a local artist with the words, "Some things aren't for sale." Mama Joy came outside, wiping her hands on her apron. "You staying for dinner, baby girl?" "Just passing through. Wanted to see the place." Mama Joy pulled her into a hug that smelled like collard greens and home. "Your father would be so proud." Amara's throat tightened. "I hope so. Ain't no hoping about it. You took down a whole empire with a legal pad and the truth. That's Brooks' blood." She squeezed tighter. "What you gonna do now?" Amara smiled. "Law school. Start in the fall." Mama Joy pulled back, eyes shining. "Lord have mercy. They're gonna regret letting you in that courtroom once you actually know what you're doing." They laughed, the kind of laugh that carries grief and hope in equal measure. Later, Amara walked to the Brooks family plot. The land was hers again, fully, legally. No trusts, no shell companies, no ghosts in the paperwork. She turned down developer offers, dozens of them, each one larger than the last. Because some things weren't for sale. The community center broke ground in the spring. Jobs programs, legal aid clinic, financial literacy workshops. Everything Elijah had dreamed about. Everything Ryu had tried to bury. She stood at the edge of the plot, watching the sun set over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of gold and fire. A text came through on her phone. "Agent Carter, TAC just gave up 2 more associates. The investigation keeps growing. You started something that won't stop." She smiled. "Type back, good." Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She almost didn't open it. Then she did. It was a video. Grainy, security footage style. A Brooklyn street corner. November 12th, 2019. 22:47 timestamp. Her father, Walking home. A dark sedan, no plates, accelerating. Impact. The car fleeing. And in the driver's seat, visible for just 2 frames, attorney tack Jean Woo. The message below read, from a friend. Thought you'd want to see what we recovered from a warehouse in Queens. Carter. She watched it 3 times. Then she deleted it. Not because she wanted to forget, but because she didn't need it anymore. Justice was already served. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of the city, exhaust and food carts, and a million lives intersecting. Somewhere in that city, warehouse workers were checking their pension balances and finding money that had been stolen returned. Somewhere, a woman was reading about the case and realizing she didn't have to stay silent about the man who gaslit her. Somewhere, a daughter was learning that fighting back wasn't crazy. It was survival. Amara Brooks walked away from the plot toward the subway that would take her back to her small apartment in Bed-Stuy, the one she'd rented with the divorce settlement, the one that was hers and hers alone. She wasn't Madame Ryu anymore. She'd never been Madame Ryu. She was Elijah Brooks's daughter, the girl who could carry 6 plates and still remember your order by heart. The woman who'd brought down an empire with the truth. And she was just getting started. They tried to erase her. She erased them instead.